Hello, I'm Andy Dow, and because my time is limited, I'm going to read a shortened version of Matthew chapter 20, verses 1 to 16, the parable of the workers in the vineyard. Jesus said, "The kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire men to work in his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius for the day. Several more times that day, the vineyard owner hired more labourers and sent them into his vineyard. At the end of the day, when pay time came, those hired last were paid first and received a denarius. So when the workers hired first were paid, they expected to receive more, but they too got a denarius. They complained at the perceived unfairness, but the owner stressed that he had honoured their contract and they shouldn't be jealous if he was surprisingly generous to others. Jesus concluded, "So the last will be first, and the first will be last." All over the world, children have a saying which so frequently rolls off their lips. "It's not fair. That's not fair," they cry. What a keen sense of justice and fair play children have. And in our Bible story from St. Matthew chapter 20, there is a group of people, adults actually, not children, who cry, in effect, "That's not fair." They say it to their employer, a vineyard owner, whom they feel has treated them unjustly because he's paid them the same wage that he has given to other labourers who've worked far less time. More of the story in a moment. Right now, we need to see how Jesus concluded it. Chapter 20 and verse 16, he says, "So the last will be first, and the first will be last." We detect a hint straight away that in God's economy, in God's way of doing things, our normally accepted standards of justice or fair play may not operate. We could be in for a surprise or even a shock. The last will be first, and the first will be last. Now, according to the Gospels, Jesus uttered this saying at least 10 times. He obviously regarded it as important. And in fact, he has said it just before telling our story, at the end of a conversation with his disciples recorded for us in Matthew chapter 19. And this conversation provides us with the vital context for understanding the labourers in the vineyard saga. In chapter 19, we find Jesus and the disciples engaged in a lively discussion about the cost of being a true Christian. In particular, they've been debating the difficult issue about what, if anything, they have to give up in order to follow the Lord. That's a very contemporary question, asked by many inquiring into the Christian faith. Peter says, "Well, Lord, me and my 11 friends, we've given up everything to follow you. So what, if anything, are we to get in return? What's in it for us?" And in reply, Jesus gives a promise that has strengthened Christians all down the years. It has heartened them and motivated them to make big sacrifices for his sake. Jesus says, "Everyone who has left houses or family or fields for my sake will receive 100 times as much and will inherit eternal life." Now, the detail of that promise need not concern us. Rather, let's go to the vital truth behind it. God, our Creator, takes careful note of everything we try to do for him. Nothing we do, no sacrifice we make for Jesus' sake goes unnoticed or unrecorded in the records of heaven. And as a result, God will never be in our debt. No, rather, in some way, please don't ask me how, God will make up to the Christian everything that he or she may have given up for the gospel's sake. And that is a great incentive to launch out in faith in Christian discipleship and service. And what it means is, at base, is this: that God is just, absolutely just. No one, but no one, will ever be able to accuse God of unfairness. However, as we said just now, be prepared for surprises. And so it was for Peter and his friends, because no sooner has Jesus given this marvelous mega promise than he adds that arresting saying of his. Verse 30 of chapter 19, but many who are first will be last, and many who are last will be first. Note the little word but. This must be some kind of a warning or check, and this warning must be something to do with those promised rewards. Yes, it is something to do with how rewards work in the kingdom of heaven. Perhaps we could dare to put these words into the mouth of Jesus. Peter and the others, you have given up things for my sake, and you will get your just reward. But Peter, please don't think of it solely as a carefully calculated wage or payback, as something due to you, like a carefully calculated salary package. That's the way the world would think of it, and God's accounting principles are different. But many who are first will be last. What is in Jesus' mind here? Surely this, Peter and co, you may have been my first disciples, the longest standing followers, but please get out of your heads any notion that there is some kind of worldly hierarchy in my kingdom, a hierarchy based on length of service or degree of work. To put it in terms of the parable that follows, Jesus is reminding them that they and we are actually only hired labourers, and we've only been drawn in by the grace and initiative of the vineyard owner, God himself. There really is a message here for Christians 2,000 years later. It is possible, sadly, for long-standing members of a particular church, those who've borne the burden of the work, to claim a certain right to power or prestige or authority. And as a result, they can feel resentful of newcomers who may be quickly rising stars, or resentful of new Christians who want to change things. But such feelings are based on the world's values, on the world's system of justice, where the first are always last and the last remain last. Not so in God's kingdom. As this, my story will illustrate, says Jesus. Walk on, please, the workers in the vineyard. Strange story, isn't it? Thoroughly first century Palestinian. It's the end of September. The grape harvest is due. Soon the rains will arrive. We must gather the crop in before that, so we need every worker that can be found. So out goes the owner of the vineyard, first thing in the morning to the marketplace, to find some men and strike some deal with them for their labour. 1 denarius for a day's work. That was the going daily rate for casual labour. Yes, the owner, God, is being just. He's on track for fairness. And when at the end of the day it's pay time, those early workers get 1 denarius, exactly as agreed. The vineyard owner keeps his side of the bargain. Yes, God is just. But is that all? Well, no. Because as the sun goes down that day, first in the pay queue that evening are the late workers, those who'd been taken on by the owner at different times during the day. Some had only been in the vineyard an hour, and as far as we can tell, these late arrivals had struck no deal at all with the owner. They were entirely at his mercy. And what do they receive? A single denarius, the same. Yes, God is just, or rather put it this way, to those who were hired first, according to the agreement, the landowner shows complete justice as we humans see it. But to those who were hired later, he showed justice plus. Let's call it justice extra. And it's summed up in verse 14, where the landowner speaks with the grumblers, those who'd cried, "Hey, that's not fair." He says to them, "Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the man who was hired last the same as I gave you." Why did the landowner want to do that? Because he had a generous heart, you say? Yes, the answer is because he was bringing into his calculations other factors completely outside pure economics. And there may be something for those of you who are employers here. Into his reckoning comes his awareness that a denarius a day, despite being the accepted going rate, did not exactly make the recipients wealthy people. So for anyone to take home less than that was really to condemn some households to a hungry night, a breadline existence. And Justice Extra could not live with that. God's delight to exercise justice and justice extra. Think back over your life for a moment, your life as a Christian, if you are one. Some of us have been Christians for a long time, others less time. And perhaps we've been conscious at certain seasons of God's blessing. And yes, we can see some sort of link between that and some kind of obedience to him on our part. We really did try to go God's way, and we've found that God has been just. He's kept his promise. The agreed denarius has been handed to us. But sometimes we have received bonuses or blessings that have come, we feel, almost in spite of ourselves, rather than because of ourselves. We've been so slow, for instance, on the uptake for God, so slow to do his will, late into the vineyard, perhaps. But yet God has still chosen to bless us. Justice extra. Someone has put it this way: no Christian has received less than has been promised, but many very often receive more. As such, it's as the owner, God says in verse 15, "Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money?" So where does this leave us? Maybe you are, as a Christian, working hard at your Christian life and Christian service, and it has cost you something. And at times you wonder whether it's all worth it. Do you have that question in your mind? Remember, God is just. And the God of justice will never be in debt to you. There will be some due recognition. So keep going and try not to look down in judgment on those you consider to be less committed than you. Or maybe you're feeling very unworthy, perhaps because you've only really followed Jesus later in life and you regret all those wasted years. And even now you feel you haven't got much to offer him. Remember, God is just, but with justice extra. So God looks not only at where you've got to, but where you're trying to get to with him. And in his kingdom, sometimes the last will be first. There will be some accounting surprises in heaven. Or maybe you're just feeling a bit flat as a Christian. It's all gone a bit cold on you. Then let this story remind you again of the sheer love and grace of God towards you. At some point in the day, as it were, the owner of the vineyard, the Lord of the universe, went out into the marketplace, not for the first time, and found you, and found me. He drew you in. He drew me in. Somebody once asked this question: do you believe in God? It's a very important question. But equally important is the question reversed. Does God believe in me? Well, the answer is, from this story, that as the God of justice and justice extra, he certainly does. He really does believe in you and me. So God bless you.